Adventure Stories. Приключенческие рассказы.
Meeks bowed to show that he agreed to the price. "I'll try to solve your case, Mr. Meeks," said Jones. "The disappearance of people in this city has always been an interesting problem to me. I remember a case that I once solved. A family of the name of Clark disappeared suddenly from a small flat in which they were living. I watched the flat building for 2 months for a clue. One day I noticed that a certain milkman's boy always walked backward when he carried his milk upstairs. This fact gave me a clue. I followed it and at once found the family that had disappeared. They had moved next door and changed their name from Clark to Crock. Shamrock Jones and his client went to the tenement house where Mary Snyder had lived. The detective wanted to see the room in which she had lived. It had been occupied by no one since her disappearance. The room was small, dirty, and poorly furnished. Meeks seated himself sadly on a broken chair, while the great detective searched the walls and the floor and the old broken furniture for a clue. At the end of half an hour, Jones had found a few things that to Meeks didn't seem important. They were a cheap black hat-pin, a piece of a theatre program, and a piece of a small card on which was the word left and then C12. Shamrock Jones stood near the wall for 10 minutes with his head upon his hand. At the end of that time he said, "Come, Mr. Meeks, the problem is solved. I can take you immediately to the house where your sister is living. And don't be anxious about her. She has plenty of money, for the present at least." Meeks was happy. "How did you manage it?" he asked. Jones was always ready to describe his methods to his surprised listeners. "On this torn piece of card," he said, "you can see the word left, the letter C, and the number 12. Now, I happen to know that number 12, Avenue C, is a first-class boarding house, which of course is too expensive for your sister. But then I find this piece of a theatre program. What does that mean? I think it means this. If your sister is a scrub woman, as you have told me, we may think that she scrubs the floors in a theatre too. Where is jewelry lost most often? In the theatres, of course. Look at that piece of program, Mr. Meeks. Can you see the round mark on it? What does this mark mean? It means that a ring, perhaps a very expensive ring, has been wrapped in it. The explanation may be this. Mrs. Snyder found the ring when she was scrubbing the floor in the theatre. She tore off a piece of a program, wrapped the ring carefully in it, and carried it home. The next day she sold it and then decided to find a more comfortable place in which to live. Well, if everything I have told you is right, I see nothing impossible about the expensive boarding house number 12 Avenue C. It is there we shall find your sister, Mr. Meeks." Shamrock Jones finished his speech with a smile of a successful artist. Meek's happiness was too great for words. Together they went to number 12 Avenue C. They rang the bell and asked the servant who opened the door whether Mrs. Snyder lived there. The servant told them that no lady of that name had ever lived at that address. As they were going away, Meeks examined the things from his sister's old room. "I am no detective," he said to Jones as he raised the piece of theatre program to his nose. "But it seems to me that the round mark on this paper was not left by a ring, but by one of those round peppermint drops. And this piece, with the address on it, looks to me like the end of a theatre ticket, seat number 12, row C, left side." Shamrock Jones had a far-away look in his eyes. "I think you ought to consult Juggins," he said. "Who is Juggins?" asked Meeks. "He is the leader," said Jones, "of a new modern school of detectives. Their methods are different from ours, but it is said that Juggins has solved some very difficult cases. I will take you to him." They found the great Juggins in his office. He was a small man with light hair. When they came in, he was reading a book. The two great detectives shook hands with ceremony, and Meeks was introduced. "Tell me the facts," said Juggins, going on with his reading. When Meeks finished, the great detective closed his book and said, "Do I understand that your sister is 52 years of age, with a large mole on the side of her nose? Is she a poor widow making her living by scrubbing floors?" "That describes her exactly," said Meeks. Juggins rose and put on his hat. "In 15 minutes," he said, "I will return bringing your sister's present address." Shamrock Jones turned pale, but tried to smile. In 15 minutes exactly, Juggins returned, holding a little piece of paper in his hand. "Your sister, Mary Snyder," he announced calmly, "will be found at number 162 Chilton Street. She is living in the back room on the 5th floor. The house is only 4 blocks from here," he continued, addressing Meeks. "I think you should go and see if that is so and return here. Mr. Jones will wait for you, I hope." Meeks hurried away. In 20 minutes he was back again with a happy face. "She is there, and she is well," he cried. "Name your price." $2, said Juggins. When Meeks had paid his bill and gone away, Shamrock Jones stood with his head in his hand before Juggins. "Would you mind telling me?" he asked the greater detective. "Certainly not," said Juggins pleasantly. "I will tell you how I did it. You remember the description of Mrs. Snyder? Did you ever know a woman like her who wasn't paying weekly installments on an enlarged portrait of herself? Women like her all do it. There is a big factory where portraits are enlarged just around the corner. I went there and got her address out of the book with the addresses of their clients. That's all.